Today's video is going to be all about the Lisa Eldridge Vega eyeshadow palette. I'm going to be doing a deep dive on this palette, showing you how I did this eye look and some of the rest of the look as well, the cheeks and the lips, everything that I used. And I'm going to be doing individual swatches of all of these eyeshadow shades and comparing them to a couple of other palettes that I have that have a similar feel to this palette in a certain sense. Before we get into that, if you enjoy this video and you enjoy my content, I would love for you to subscribe to my channel. If you like this video, you can give it a thumbs up. And with all that said, let's get into the video. The look I've created today is really not my typical type of eye look. It's very smoky and dark and dramatic. I used a lot of black eyeshadow in this look, which I typically don't use, and a lot of cool tones, but this was just the look that I felt like doing today. It was somewhat inspired by a look that I saw in a Vogue video with Kendall Jenner, where she was going through past looks that she's worn, and I had actually screenshotted this picture because I was very inspired by this look. And then I was Google image searching that picture today, and I actually discovered that Lisa Eldridge had done that look. I thought that was quite a fun coincidence and made a lot of sense to not try to recreate that look, but definitely be inspired by that look while using the Vega palette. Before I get into showing you how I did the look, I'm going to do the individual swatches of this palette. So I'm going to start out right here. I'm going to move in this direction. So starting out with the lightest matte in the palette, this is a velvet formula and it's called French Gray. It's described as a light neutral stone. And I'll build it up a little bit. So the velvet formula is that cream to powder type formula, and it definitely has a creamy feeling in the pan and a very smooth feeling. And it blends out very, very easily and is certainly buildable. And I mentioned in my first video with this collection that I felt like the velvet formula almost had a slight sort of transparent quality to it, and not in the sense that it's not pigmented, but there's just the way that cream eyeshadows look. I feel like there's this slight kind of more translucent quality. And I definitely feel that in this one too. And you can see the edges just blur out so beautifully and diffuse really nicely, and it can get a nice gradient of intensity. The next shade is Smoke and Mirrors, which is a seamless matte. This is the more traditional powder matte formula. It also feels very smooth and creamy, but just a touch drier than the velvet formula. So there's that. Described as a medium, deep, cool gray slate. So I'm still struggling to determine the difference between the seamless matte and the velvet formulas here. I understand that the textures feel different to the touch. They certainly do, but I feel like they have a really similar effect when you're actually working with them on the eyes, and when I'm blending them out on my hand here, they seem to do similar things, I guess. Perhaps the gradient I was able to get with the velvet shade was a bit smoother. There's a bit more of a stark difference here rather than a smooth gradient. Perhaps the velvets are just a little bit easier to blend out in that sense, but the seamless mattes are also very blendable and easy to work with. The thing that I'm having the steepest learning curve with these new Lisa Eldridge palettes is the pigmentation level in the mattes. They are more softly pigmented than I tend to always expect when I'm dipping into the pan. So my go-to mattes, the ones that I'm most familiar with, are probably the Natasha Denona and the Pat McGrath mattes, and those are usually the types of mattes that one dip into the pan gives you quite a lot of pigment to work with. But I find these are just more buildable. It's not a negative thing. It's just something that I'm not quite as used to, and that I have to keep remembering to just start with more product on my brush if I want to be able to create my eye looks a little bit faster, rather than having to dip back in the pan over and over again. The next shade is Moon Swirl, which is described as a satin slash metallic. It's a cool silvery mink taupe. If you can hear the noise in the background, I apologize. There's someone working in the kitchen on the drawers upstairs. There's Moon Swirl. It's interesting that they're describing this as a satin slash metallic because I don't remember that being one of the 6 formulas that Lisa mentioned in her launch video. So it seems like it's obviously kind of a hybrid between a satin and a metallic. It's quite beautiful. It has that more warmish brownie type base with a bit of a cooler reflect on it. And it actually reminds me quite a bit of this shade in the Makeup by Mario Ethereal Eyes, so I'm going to compare that one right now. Feeling to the touch between the two is incredibly different. The Mario one feels much drier and kind of looser. But there's what that looks like. There is more shine on the Makeup by Mario and a stronger base on the Lisa Eldridge. And the Mario is looking a little bit warmer. It has a little bit more of a kind of bronzy look to it. Another seamless matte. This one is called Turbulence and it's a cool medium brown. So I have to say I do particularly appreciate the softer pigmentation level on these deeper colors. I just find that makes them much easier and less scary to work with. You can see how buildable this one is. There's 2 layers. And I like that although this is a cool brown, I think just because it's a brown, it adds a little bit of warmth in comparison to the rest of this palette. And I really enjoyed using this one in my look today as well, just to kind of ground it a little bit and bring a little bit of slight warmth to the look. And that made me a little bit more comfortable with the look. So there's that one. You can see there is a little bit of a sheen. And the Seamless Matte formula is supposed to have a little bit of very, very tiny pearl in it to help it to blend out. And I could see, I think that's coming through in that little bit of shine that we saw with that shade. The next one is a luminous shade. It's called Supernova. The luminous formula, again, it doesn't feel super creamy. It's a little bit more dry to the touch, I find, in the pan. There's that. And it has this beautiful metallic reflect. And the luminous formula is the one that is meant to have more of a medium payoff and a semi-transparent base. And I can definitely see that the base is not extremely strong in this. You can see the base there and then the shift, but the base is certainly not opaque. And this shade Supernova is described as a silver with rose pink and silver sparkles. And then lastly, we have the main shadow I used on my eyes today, Lamp Black, which is another seamless matte. This one feels a little bit drier to the touch than the others that are in this palette, which I think is understandable because it's a black. I think that's pretty common. There it is. And it's just described as a true black. This was another one I was pleased that it was not overly pigmented right at the beginning because it made it much more approachable for me to work with as someone who very, very rarely uses black eyeshadows. And you can see how it can diffuse out around the edges. I'm gonna try to do a couple of comparisons for Moon Swirl here. Because it has that semi-transparent base, I think it's probably going to be quite difficult to find something that really looks like that, but I'm going to go into this shade right here in the Mario Ethereal Eyes. The texture feels completely different. The Mario ones have this kind of gel base to them. There's the Mario shade, quite different. The Mario looks much warmer and darker. I also have this shade in this Tom Ford quad. This was a limited edition from holiday a few years ago. It's the Soleil Neige quad. This is in the wet dry formula. I just wanted to see how this taupey shade would compare as well. So this one, again, it's a little darker. and not as shiny. And then the Natasha Denona Glam palette was the only other palette that I thought I have that would be relevant for comparisons here. And looking at this, I can try this brow bone shade in comparison. I don't think there's anything that's quite the same. You can see that the tones are different. That reflects kind of a warmer champagne, where even the base of the Lisa Eldridge is a little bit more pink in comparison. I don't think anything else in this Tom Ford palette is comparable, but I will just hold them up next to each other because the color stories are kind of similar. It's just that the textures don't really match. Maybe I'll do the kind of navy color compared with Smoke and Mirrors. Quite different. There's a lot more blue that comes through from the Tom Ford shade, where this is looking quite gray next to it. And here I'm comparing the French Gray shade from Lisa Eldridge with Crease and then Transition from the Natasha Denona Glam. And then the bottom swatch is this one from the Mario palette. So nothing really the same there, I would say. French Gray is lighter and just a little bit of a kind of softer, more true gray than these other shades, which have a more taupe quality. Here's a side-by-side of Vega with Ethereal Eyes and Vega with Natasha Denona Glam. And here's the whole Vega palette swatched. French Gray, Smoke and Mirrors, Moon Swirl, Turbulence, Supernova, and Lamp Black. I think now is a good time to get into the demo of this eye look. So I didn't stick completely to this, but I think you could basically do this look with just this palette. I just added a couple other things in because I wanted to test how it would work with other products. So I did start with a little bit of a base of the Victoria Beckham Satin Kajal liner, the black one. You'll see me blend that out and apply that. And then I went in with all of the shadows from this palette. And then I cheated just a tiny bit and I went in with this shade, this top coat in the Myth palette, just to finish it off a little, but I don't think it's really necessary. It was just a little added touch that I wanted to play with. So let's get into the demo now, and then I'll come back and talk you through applying a little bit of blush and what I have on my lips. I wanted to add just a touch of color to my cheeks, not too much, but I thought the Merit Flush Balm in Beverly Hills would be perfect because it's quite sheer. It has a little bit of a shiny finish, which I feel like is going to go with the kind of glossy editorial style look. So I'm just going to take a little bit of that on my brush here. Kind of try to focus it a bit further back. I usually like to put quite a lot of blush on the apples of my cheeks, but I think for this look it makes sense to go a little bit further back. Because I wanted this kind of editorial style look, I tried to keep my base really kind of fresh and glossy as well. So I used a little bit of the Nars Light Reflecting Foundation, and I actually applied that only with my fingers. I didn't go with a brush or a sponge to really work it into the skin, and I found I was able to use such a small amount of product when I was doing it that way. I also had a really dewy base underneath that because I've been using my Nivea cream a lot, the very thick occlusive cream. I had that all over my face as a base as well, so that really helped everything to glide over very smoothly. I then went in with my Monika Blundercover just as a little bit of a concealer, just in certain areas where I wanted a tiny bit more coverage. Again, just patting it in and blending it with my fingers. And I had actually intended to add that under my eyes, which I didn't do. I just have the foundation under my eyes. I was planning to do my concealer after I'd done my lids, but I completely forgot, and I was working on the lower lash line with my shadows. But I found that I actually didn't get any fallout, so that was good. That's why I had reserved that area for concealer. But this could potentially look a little bit better with a little bit more brightness under the eyes. But I think, again, for this style of look, it's working out all right. I think I want to add a little bit more blush back here. I'm going to go in with my Cava highlighter from Merit as well. This has a really nice, again, glossy kind of texture. With a little bit of kind of pearl in there. For my lips, I want to try and keep them quite natural, but again, with some glossiness. Right now, I just have the Dior lip oil in the pink shade on. I'm going to take that off and try maybe a tiny little bit of the Sorcery liner because it has a little bit of coolness to it. So just the tiniest bit to outline my lips, and then I thought I'd try going in with a little bit of the Go Lightly gloss from Lisa Eldridge. We'll see how that looks. I may switch it out, but let's give that a try. There's the liner on, and I've changed my mind about the gloss. I don't want Go Lightly. I'm gonna go with Victoria Beckham Bikini and see how that looks. I think Go Lightly was just gonna be a little bit too colorful for this. And then I'm just gonna blot it down because I find it a bit too shiny. So here's the completed look. Overall, I think this is the ultimate cool tone palette. I find it very easy to work with, so that's a big bonus, especially when you're working with shades that you're not all that used to and not as comfortable with. So I think it's really nice and easy to work with. I like the variety of tones we have in here. I like that we have this more kind of true dove gray type shade that you actually don't see all that often. I feel like a lot of shades that you might think are like this are actually more taupe, which I like taupes too, but it's nice to have this option here. And I think the two shiny offerings in this palette are very beautiful and fun to work with as well, and just add nice dimension to any look that you can create with this palette. I feel like I've talked quite a lot about the matte, so I don't have much more to say about that. But I will say, when I was working with these on my eyes, when I was creating this look today, I was struck by how blurred the mattes looked on my eyes, and that was something that I really enjoyed and appreciated. So they have a very nice texture and appearance, in addition to being very easy to work with. And if I had to pick my favorite shades in this palette, I would say French Gray and Supernova. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have any questions or comments below. Always love to see those. And if you'd like to see more from me and you haven't subscribed to my channel already, I'd love for you to do so. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.